stay focused on the goal. If you can like picture and envision once you've done it, what it's going to feel like. And you have to be able to see it. And if you can see it, then you can do what it takes to work through it to get there.
Divot.
This episode is brought to you by Delve and Pulley.
Today, we're in Hillsborough, California, inside the home of Julie Bornstein, a leader who's redefined modern fashion and commerce. Julie is the CEO and co-founder of Daydream, an AI-powered search and discovery platform for fashion shopping. A Harvard graduate, Julie helped lead the digital revolution at Sephora. She helped scale Stitch Fix as it became a public company. She founded the Yes, an AI-driven shopping platform acquired by Pinterest. And now she serves on the boards of companies like Weight Watchers, Sweetgreen, and Redfin. She's trusted by some of the most iconic consumer brands and fashion houses for her ability to see culture, technology, and retail and where it's going. Hope you enjoy our conversation. How did you get started in fashion?
When I was growing up, I wanted to be a fashion designer. I have been obsessed since my mom said since I was 2, and she would pull something out and I would say, no, I'm, going to wear this. And I used to sketch and, I wanted to be Gloria Vanderbilt when I grew up. So I've been interested my whole life.
Did you, straight out of college, did you go to design clothes? Did you go into business? Like what path did you take?
So when I got into high school, I started to get really interested in politics and in pro-choice. And so I ended up going to Harvard undergrad and was a government major. So I sort of didn't go to school for anything fashion or even business related. It was very liberal arts. But when I was graduating, I really wanted to go work in business, and I just thought it would be so much fun to work in fashion. And so my friends were either going to med school, law school, investment banking, and I didn't know what investment banking was, and I didn't want to go to med school or law school. So I thought I'll go work in business. And I always loved running like student groups. And so business school just seemed like an interesting potential graduate path if I wanted to take it. So I wrote letters to 3 fashion houses in New York City, the old fashioned way where you type it up and you mail it to them. It's amazing to me that anything got done before the internet. And it was Donna Karan, Ralph Lauren, and Calvin Klein. They were like the 3 big fashion houses at the time.
Wow. There
was a lot less, and 2 of them ignored me, and 1 of them hired me, and that was the start.
Who did you write a letter to?
To the whom it may concern in the Office of Personnel. I mean, we didn't have LinkedIn.
Right.
I had no idea who I was writing. I mean, it's crazy to think about it.
Right.
And someone at Donna Karan, the woman who runs HR, got the letter, saw it, liked the, conviction in my letter, and called me up for an interview.
It's crazy how history repeats. This is the exact way I still tell young people in college, they're trying, how do I get a job? How do I get an internship? This is exactly what I tell them to do. Just they can go to LinkedIn. It's much easier,
yes.
But still nobody does it. Like figure out who the CEO is, the VP of whatever, go write them the most thoughtful message, spend 2 hours writing a really short, thoughtful message and send it to them and tell them why you desperately want to work there as an intern. And the success rate is like 80%. It's crazy. People that I have my niece is in fashion and she did this summer and she got this amazing internship, this, incredible place. They never advertise internships. I have another friend that did it. So I don't know. I don't know. It still works all these years later.
I'm 100% with you. First of all, people are doing it because I get those kinds of letters a few times a month.
Do you?
I do.
Really thoughtful ones?
Really thoughtful, really interesting, young people who want to. And, I would say when I get something from LinkedIn saying, I'm interested in fashion and your journey is interesting, I'd like to talk to you for 15 minutes or pick your brain, I don't have even the time to respond to the people that write wonderful things, but, those things don't go anywhere. But yeah, if someone takes the time to really put thoughts together, I'll either respond or I'll ask my head of HR to respond or connect them to the right person or something. Yeah. And my son actually got a job that way this summer too. So he took our advice and he wrote to the head of a podcast about film, which is what he wanted to do. And the guy said to him, I get so many letters, but yours was so thoughtful that I decided to respond.
You can tell, right? When somebody puts care and time and energy into something,
totally,
you can feel this it's sort of like their soul comes out in these, even if it's like 10 sentences, you
Yeah.
can see. And because there's so much of the other thing. I don't know, the signal versus the noise.
Yeah.
What is the business of fashion? Can you explain it to somebody that doesn't understand how it works? I mean, I buy clothes, I buy lots of shoes, but how do these fashion companies actually make money?
There's different parts of the ecosystem. So there are the manufacturers who create the brands and create demand and, you know, sort of the vibe around their brand. And they are often working with third party producers who are actually creating the garments, but they'll come up with a design, they'll make samples. And so that's the wholesale side of the business. Now, that part also has a lot of direct to consumer businesses, but it's people who have a vision for a product and a brand and, build that around them. And those businesses make money by selling either through department stores, third party retailers, or directly online and in their own stores. And then there's retailers who are sort of curating and buying off of many different brands lines and, creating an assortment and selling that product. And then they basically they share the margin with the brand who creates the product. And it's interesting because before, in pre e-commerce, you would go to a store and have a need and you have to fill that need in the store. And it was sometimes hard to do it, finding the thing you want in the right size, the right color. And I remember in the early days of e-commerce, you would go to Nordstrom.com, one of the early players, and, we would have a lot of stuff, but there was still most people were not online. And then over the years, we're now in 2025, the problem is the opposite. It's complete overwhelm. There's so much out there. The barrier to start a brand is so low, and the barrier to start a website is so low, thanks to Shopify, that, there are truly, there've got to be hundreds of thousands of brands out there in the fashion space alone, let alone, every other vertical.
You've probably seen hundreds, maybe thousands of fashion brands over the last few decades. What have you seen work for building a great brand in fashion, and what have you seen not work?
First of all, I worked at a brand when I first graduated from college, and since then I've been on the sort of retail side. So I am no brand expert. But what I have seen in the patterns of all the brands that have thrived and those that haven't is that it's a combination of having a differentiation, so having a unique perspective. Why does this brand exist? What is it doing in the marketplace? What is the role is it filling? And having kind of the right price point that maps to what that sort of place in the market, having a clear understanding of who your customer is and who you're creating something for. And then, having a way to connect with your customers that feels authentic. And I think those are the things that are really meaningful. And I've seen brands that are small and have never really gotten to enough scale that they could survive. And I would argue that those brands didn't have a clear point of view. It wasn't really clear who they were selling to. The styles of their products were kind of all over the place, and they were usually priced wrong for what the product was. So it's sort of a combination of all of those things.
How did these brands get resurrected? Like there's this brand Stussy that I remember wearing
Yeah.
when I was a young teenager. My kids are wearing this brand now. I see adults wearing this brand.
Yeah.
Is there some uh algorithm that says, hey, every 20 years, you can just reintroduce the old brand back into the marketplace and it will get accepted? Or
So there probably is, but we haven't discovered it yet. No one's spent the time to build what that algorithm is. But it's really interesting because I remember thinking about the brand Pucci, which is a high-end brand that's beautiful and was very popular in the 70s and then kind of went out of fashion. But it's a luxury Italian brand, and it came back last year, and it's absolutely gorgeous, similar to Stussy and many other brands. Actually, Wrangler is back, and so there's definitely something. It's a combination, I would say. There's nostalgia is definitely something that is become kind of ever present in the internet and a lot of social media. And so I think what happens is someone sort of says, I believe in this brand. I want to bring it back. So it needs someone who's really creative to drive a vision for how to modernize the brand. keep sort of what made it feel cool and special, but make it adaptable to today's customer. And I think there are a number of brands that have done it, and it's always really fun to see it.
Who decides what we're going to be wearing next? Who's deciding that the jeans that we wore in college? I mean, my wife just shows up with jeans that like the same jeans she wore in college. She just pulled them out of the closet. She still had them. She just starts wearing them again.
Yeah.
They're like, it's all back. It's all cool again. Like, are there people deciding this? Is this just happening? Is it?
It's really driven by the luxury fashion houses in Europe. So they're putting things out on the runway, and then everyone else is copying them, and they're getting their ideas from them. So one of the reasons that the luxury brands don't love kind of the fast fashion brands is because they literally just knock them off and make them available at Zara and H&M and those kinds of
They just
places.
wait till it comes down the runway. They're like, have their designers and everyone ready to go and just start putting
Yes.
on the conveyor belt.
They'll make some decisions. Not everything that's shown on, the runway translates. And so it's kind of a matter of deciding what does translate. One of the most fascinating things about Zara, which is one of the most successful businesses ever in the sort of apparel retail space, is that they have the process of doing a lot of things in a light way and then seeing what's working and have really quick production times to chase what is working and to let go of what's not working. But yes, I mean, it starts with the fashion houses, and then it's, the magazines and the influencers start to cover and talk about things, and it gets kind of in the ether, and then the rest of the industry sort of like takes inspiration from it.
It is incredible how like a brand like Nordstrom can kind of evolve and survive. And I know you spent a lot of time there.
Yeah.
And then a brand like JCPenney or something, which I remember vividly spending a lot of time in, and it's just like disappeared, you know, gone off the face of the earth. I don't know, maybe it will come back. But it's crazy how things seem to move so quickly and you can be so behind so fast.
Yeah.
And even in someone in tech and in startups, like it feels like fashion moves almost light years ahead of what, maybe not AI, but some trends in tech. It's just equally paced at minimum.
Yeah, it's true. It is. There's the similarity there. I mean, I think that Target really replaced the role of JCPenney, and JCPenney kind of lost its edge for sort of the average consumer with better pricing. I remember getting lost in a JCPenney very well when I was a kid. Yeah, I couldn't find my mom. It was very traumatic. I think Nordstrom, and one of the reasons I love the sort of multi-brand space is I realized when I was young that I wasn't talented enough to be a fashion designer, but I love the kind of looking across and creating sort of place where you can curate all these different brands and you sort of see and can serve lots of different customers with them. And that I think is the beauty of Nordstrom. And I think Nordstrom's exceptionally well run. And so they've been able to stay relevant all these years. There are other department stores that are a little more challenged right now, but I hope they all survive because it would be sad to not have.
Does the family aspect of the Nordstroms impact it in good and bad ways? I mean,
Yes, I think so.
You've got somebody who's, or I'm not saying somebody, but at least you've got this kind of like a founder-ish kind of situation where maybe they're a little bit more long-term
Yep.
thinking. Also, maybe also the shrapnel that comes from being long-term thinking. But does that play into their success at all, or?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember when I joined, it was Blake and Bruce, who are no longer with us, but they would say
Blake and Bruce Nordstrom.
yes. So Bruce Nordstrom was the father. He was the grandson of John Nordstrom, who started the company in like 1903. I hope I have that right. And so his grandson, Bruce Nordstrom, then had his next generation was Blake, Eric, and Pete. And Blake, Aaron, and Pete then ran the company. They had another family. The other side of the family, which was Bruce's brother, had Dan Nordstrom and then Bill and maybe John. And I think that, although the third one I may have
This
gotten
is
wrong.
impressive.
Yeah. Dan Nordstrom actually was still working at the company when I joined. He was the one that launched e-commerce.
Yeah.
He was the sort of, they called him the cowboy, but he was also the visionary. And I spent 6 months trying to convince him to hire me, and he did. And I had a great time working with him. And he's now actually an investor in Daydream. But he really was the one that had the vision for e-commerce before, I would say, most of the other companies did in the late 90s. And yeah, I do think that because it's family run, there is a sense, it feels like founder driven in many ways. And I think there's care that they take and definitely a long-term view. And they recently went private. So they took the company private so they could do things they wanted to outside of the public markets for that reason. So yeah.
This episode is sponsored by Delve, the leading AI platform for fast-growing companies to get compliant with SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and more. Trusted by Whisperflow, Bland, Instantly, and many other brands. For our listeners, they're offering $1,500 off plus a one-to-one Slack channel, a manual penetration test, and an audit all included. Book a demo today at delve.com/divot.
You created a company called The Yes, and this was eventually acquired by Pinterest. Tell us about how the product and company came about and eventually picked up by Pinterest.
Yep. I was working at Sephora. I was there for 8 years and wonderful place and huge opportunity and super interesting. And I met Katrina Lake, the founder of Stitch Fix, and ended up joining her board. And then a few years in, joined full-time as COO to help the company scale and go public. And when I was there, I learned so much about both being in a startup, which I hadn't done. I had always been kind of the like startup in the bigger company prior to that. And also around algorithms and data and kind of where personalization was going, which was really fun. And it led me to start the Yes, because Stitch Fix is sort of built for people who I would say don't have super strong fashion taste, but want to look great. And so there's a group of customers that works very well with. It didn't really work as well for more fashion engaged customers. And so if you know brands and you're pretty picky about kinds of things you want, then it's hard to put 5 items in a box from a limited inventory and have those be the perfect item. So I really thought I love the model of personalization, but I really want to build a sort of recommendation engine for people who love fashion, who want to actually pick out their own things, but who want great suggestions for them. And so that's what was behind the Yes. So I started it. I met my co-founder through VC, Amit Agarwal, and we started the company in the beginning of 2018. And then we hired an amazing team. It was so much fun. And we had our brand team run by Lisa Green, who is now my co-founder at Daydream, was based in New York. And she had come from Google working on the sort of fashion and retail side of the ad sales. And so she had met every CMO on the planet. So she was a great partner. And then we basically spent the next 4 years building the experience. It took us 2 years to launch. We were about to launch and then COVID hit. So our initial launch date was March 20th, 2020. And we ended up launching in May. I thought COVID was going to be over in 3 weeks because I'm an optimist, which is why I'm an entrepreneur. And, once we realized that quite wasn't going to happen, then we launched in May. We had an app at first, then we built web, and we started to scale, and then got a call from the head of product at Pinterest, who had been he and Ben had been sort of tracking what we were doing and always felt like Pinterest would be a great e-commerce platform if built and done the right way. And Ben had I'd met him a few times, so he knew me and my career. And we started talking, and I wasn't interested in selling the company, but we had 40,000 customers and Pinterest had 400 million daily active users.
Yeah.
And what sort of the idea of what we were going to build was really exciting. So we decided to do it.
Did it feel like at some point you would have to go up against them and it was sort of make this choice of like trying to climb that huge mountain or do it with them? Or were you on kind of different paths? That then came together?
It was less that they felt like a competitor. I've always been a huge Pinterest user. I've loved the product since the early days. And after we closed the sale of the company, I found the email that I got from Ben, to every new customer that got in off the wait list. So that was a really fun thing to remember and read. But it was less about that and more that I just had so much admiration for Pinterest. And I thought if they really are serious about e-commerce, it's such a great platform because it's so fun to look at images and see them. But the way the algorithm tends to work, the stuff that you see tends not to be product that's live for sale today. And so how do you bridge that gap? We spent a lot of time talking about ideas, and then we did the deal.
How did you know how to do the deal? You've never sold a company before, I don't think. So,
Well, interestingly,
or had you?
I had worked on acquiring companies before, so I had a little bit of an advantage. I worked very briefly in investment banking.
Sure.
That was my first job out of business school. I would argue I probably didn't learn much there, but because we were doing pitch decks most of the time, trying to convince people to choose our bank
Yeah.
to work with them. But then the first job I took in Seattle was for Starbucks, and I was working with the M&A team on acquisitions. So I joined the team as at the tail end of the Tazo Tea acquisition, and then I myself, along with my boss, basically did the deal to acquire a company called Hear Music, which became sort of the genesis of all the entertainment stuff that Starbucks did in their stores. And so that was actually the best experience because I did everything soup to nuts, from doing the models, working with the finance team, working on how to structure the deal so everyone could win, going and convincing the team of 12 people at Hear Music to join Starbucks and move from San Francisco up to Seattle. So I had sort of had a chance early in my career to see that whole process through, which was incredibly helpful. And then on top of it, I had two colleagues, Richard and Chandra, who both had banking backgrounds. So between the three of us and our lawyers, we managed the process.
What are the key ingredients to making an acquisition close and then to actually making it work once you get inside a big company?
Yeah, I think the last question is the hardest part and where most failure happens. I think certainly there's lots of unknowns as you're going through due diligence and, working your way towards getting a final close of the deal. There's a term sheet, then you negotiate for 3 months and they do due diligence. And then based on the findings, you finalize the terms of the deal and then you close the deal. And that was very challenging because it was 2022. We started talking in February. The deal closed in June. And so, the market was going like this. And so it was a very, tense time. But I have to say, Ben Silverman is an amazing guy and his team was great. And they were really great to work with and partner with in that process. And then after the deal closed, we were all very excited and, I would say bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and nothing ever turns out the way you expect once you've been acquired. So talked to many companies who have gone through acquisitions, and I would say more times than not, seem to be things change once you get there, and what you had in mind doesn't quite play out the way you thought it would. There's always exceptions. I've heard some really good exceptions. Actually, I was recently talking to someone about who had joined Instagram as one of their early employees at Facebook. And they said they felt like they went to a different company. They had been at Facebook and then they joined Instagram shortly after it was acquired. And I think, YouTube is another example where they really let these companies continue to run and do their thing and grow. And I think that's a great formula if it makes sense for the buyer. In our case, Ben ended up stepping down. A new CEO came in, had a different vision. His vision was totally legitimate, but it just meant we weren't going to do what we had come there to do. And so they were able to use a bunch of the technology that we had built, and they had, lots of need for our employees. So a lot of our team ended up staying, and many of them are actually still there. But once it was clear we weren't going to end up doing the thing I thought we were going to do, I stayed for a while and then started thinking about what was next.
Is there a specific moment that you can go back to where you said, this is when I decided to let somebody else have my baby in my startup? Or was it just the process over the months? Because a lot of people, it's like such a personal thing when you create this project, becomes a company, and it's got your fingerprints all over it. Was it one thing? Was it one moment, one night, late night, or was it just this sort of culmination of lots of things?
It was a combination of three things. One is I had a price. And because I didn't need to sell, I sort of was able to stick to my price for the most part.
Did you have more than one offer or just the one offer?
Well, at that point, we had one offer, but simultaneously at that moment, some people I knew at YouTube came to me.
Started to get interested.
Yeah. And so we ended up having preliminary conversations with them. But then, once I sort of built some trust with Ben, I stopped those conversations and just ended up pursuing the Pinterest idea for a couple of reasons. They were further along in their thinking on it. And I thought they would be a great home for us and we could do what we wanted to do together. But to your question, I would say price, the environment. So the market was really, it's 2022. The market was tanking. I was going to have to go out, in the late summer, fall to raise again. And I was well aware that it was a very different environment than when I had raised. So I knew I would be up against, I thought we could raise, but the question is how big of an, up round could we get, if at all? And I just knew that would be a big challenge. And I felt a lot of pressure from, making my team successful and making sure that they won. That was really, really top of mind for me. I thought a lot about the people on the team. And then the third was really trusting and getting excited about Ben's vision. And it was really the combination of those three things that made me decide to do it. The board was amazing. They were very helpful in the thought process, let me drive, but were good partners in thinking it through. And I felt very supported by them. I had amazing partners, Kirsten Green, John Callahan, Tony Florence, they were all great. So it was a hard decision because we were having so much fun and I loved that company. And so did, there's an amazing, our creative director was named Taylor Tomasi Hill, and she probably more than anyone put her heart and soul into this brand that we were building. And, it was really hard for all of us to walk away from that. That said, we were all, the whole team, maybe except for the two last people that had joined within a few months of our sale from Google and Facebook, who weren't necessarily excited to join another big tech company. They wanted to go to a startup, but the rest of the team was really excited about the possibilities of what we could do together.
So you do the startup, gets acquired, doesn't totally work out as planned, but lots of positive things out of it. Then you start another company. Why do that? What problem are you solving?
I didn't know right away that I would do it. I started to, once ChatGPT launched and we understood the power of an LLM, the things that I had always been thinking about were now possible in a whole new way. And that got me really excited. But I talked to a few people about other roles, other CEO jobs. But one day I was just talking to my husband and he said to me, someone else is going to build this. And if they do, and it's not you, it's going to bug the crap out of you. And I was like, oh my God, that's so true. I've got to do this. That was like the final, I'd already started to talk to a few people from my old team about this idea of Daydream. But I would say that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. And then I went to both Kirsten and John and talked about my idea, and they were both interested and supportive. And honestly, the problem that we're trying to solve is kind of the problem that I've been most obsessed with since I was maybe 10. So it is something that I am so oddly and deeply passionate about that, I'm just very excited that technology has gotten to a point where we can start to build this out. We still have lots to do. It's been much harder than I would have expected technically, actually, but yeah.
All new things are really hard,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of like when you have a child, and then, or when my wife had a child, and I was there, and then you have these like traumatic months and months, and the first year or 2 years, you're just like so overwhelmed,
Yeah.
and then you kind of like your brain, it's kind of like, wow, like all the good things you like really remember the good things, and
Yeah.
then all the really, really hard things you kind of just forget. It evaporates, and then you're like, I should have another kid.
Totally.
And then it happens all over again. You're like,
No.
what am I doing? And I can't believe how hard, even after all the startup things I've done, and many have failed and a few have been successful, like I forget how unbelievably hard it is to get something from 0 to 1.
I couldn't agree more. And I actually thought, okay, I've done this now once and it's going to be easier this time. And in many ways, it's actually harder. And I think there's something to beginner's luck. Don't get me wrong. It was really hard to do it the first time too. But to your point, I think I've blocked a lot of that out and forgotten how hard it is. Yeah. But I would say the hardest part about what we're doing now is the non-deterministic nature of LLMs, because it's very hard to describe what you want to engineers, work with them on how to build it, and have it come out the way you want it. That's just not what happens anymore. And so that's been I think, the hardest part for me.
So how does it work? And, how do I use the app?
What I wanted to be able to describe what I was looking for, whether it's, uh, long sleeve, ribbed, navy blue cardigan, or I have a wedding to go to in Austin this summer. It's daytime. Give me some ideas of what to wear or anything else, and be able to search the web, know enough about me that you can pull the right styles and brands and show me the best set of options. Today, I have to go to 10 different sites because search doesn't really work on most e-commerce sites. And if it does work, you have to be very specific with the description of what you want. I want a A-line dress with lace or something. It takes a lot of time. And so my feeling is there's so much amazing product out there, but it's so hard to get to it. And so whether you describe something or we're multimodal, you can upload a photo, whatever it is, you start with whatever it is you need, and then we help you narrow down to find the products around the web that are a good fit for you.
This episode is sponsored by Pulley, the equity management platform trusted by fast-growing startups to manage cap tables, 409As, and equity with clarity and confidence. For a limited time, Pulley is offering Divot members 20% off. To redeem your offer, request a demo at pulley.com and mention Divot. Manage equity, make decisions, and get back to work with Pulley.
Why has it been so hard for fashion brands and companies to solve this search problem? Because it's like the filtering and other things has existed for a long time.
I know. Search is a really hard problem. It's not a surprise that Google is worth what it's worth. I mean, they have solved incredibly challenging problems. And so what I would say is that the thing about fashion is that it's very nuanced, and it's not a spec-based product. It's taste-based. You have to see it to really know it, and if you like it, and then you can sort of describe something, but you may not be able to use the exact words. And the first generation of search products, actually, they're more like second generation that are out there today, sort of powering search on all these sites, is really key-based, keyword-based. And so what ends up happening is, however the merchant labels the product is basically how the user needs to find it. And, and that's not, retailers and brands, they're not technology companies. They're merchants and they're designers, and that's what they should be doing because that's what they're good at. But, what I would say is the layer of technology that can understand a product really well, which we do. So we'll get a feed from a brand. We then augment the understanding of the product. So we add lots of dimensions to it. So if we take in a jacket, it may be, maybe it's called a rain jacket, but it also has a hood and it's flowy and it's good for certain figures and it's good for certain weathers.
And AI can determine this by just looking at it?
We can use basically the combination on all text that exists around it plus the image to basically, and understand what words we want to be able to attach to it. So is it dressy? Is it casual? How do people ask for it? And how are we making sure that we're labeling all of these potential things with the product? Then the consumer can come and ask anything he or she wants. And we've understood the catalog of, millions and millions of product to show it. And then the last piece for us is we've asked you a few questions and then we learn about your behavior over time so that we can make sure to show the right stuff to you, because there's a million of versions of many things and we'd like to show you what's relevant to you.
It feels so hard to shop on Google or Amazon or other places because I think you're right. You type in something, you don't know if the keywords and other things are really going to be working properly. Also, the platforms seem so motivated to sell you the things they want to sell you.
Yeah.
And now when I go to buy something on Amazon, it's like I have to filter through all of the ads and the other things and maybe some of those products are great, but it's hard to tell. And it's like very below. And Google shopping feels the same way. It's like, what are the ulterior motives that these platforms have? Or what are their other business models where they're making money? They're kind of pushing me in these different directions. I'm trying to kind of see through it. How do you push users to the right things versus maybe what's in your best interest?
We'll never be an ad-based platform. I mean, that's the difference is, when Amazon started promoting these, sort of ad-based products, it just really broke trust with the consumer. And I think all of us feel like, you know, do you just buy the thing that's promoted on the first page? And the experience has just gone downhill because you see the same product multiple times. And I feel like trust is so important. And Google, it's an ads business. So they put a lot of effort into their ads. Their ads work well. The rest of the products, are super noisy and messy and inaccurate. And so, yeah, our whole thing is we want to build a system where if the customer wins, then we win and the brand or retailer wins. And so we're commission based. If the customer buys something, we get a fee from the brand or retailer. And if they don't, we don't. And I mean, that's the core is for us, if you don't, and any new product you try, if it doesn't work and it feels like it's promoting something because it's in their interest and not in your interest, you lose trust immediately. And so I'm a big believer in making it tied to the success for the user.
You're on the board at several big companies and you have been on the board at other companies. What do you get out of being a board of director in a big public company?
I find it both really fun and intellectually satisfying to dive deep into other businesses. They've always been quite different than the business I'm in. I would say the benefit it gives me is a couple. One is just every time you step out of your own business and you spend time thinking about another business, you see parallels and it gives you new ideas for your own business. So I would say there hasn't been a single board meeting I've ever sat through where it didn't give me some idea that then I brought back to my business and my team. So I think that's one. I think the second is the relationships you make with the management team and the board of other companies is really gratifying. I've loved the friendships I've formed with those people, and I love being able to help. Like it's really nice when you're sort of so in it day to day and everything lives on your shoulders to step out and be like, oh, I can just give you some advice and that can actually have a lot of impact. So it's fun that way. And, the relationships that I formed have helped me in my own business too. So just, networks are so valuable when you're trying to raise money, when you're trying to find talent, when you're trying to create partnerships and need to find a connection. And so I would say it's kind of all three of those things. But I'm very supportive of my team, having an outside something that they do too, because I do think it gives you perspective that's helpful.
How much time does this require? Is this like a once a quarter, you're going in for a couple of days? Is this hey, I'm getting calls once a month in the middle of the night from the CEO? Is it something, are you working with management?
It's a great question. It ebbs and flows depending on what's going on at the company. Both of my kids are now in college. So I think of my boards as my kids. They take up the time kind of around the edges, much less than my kids, I should say. I've never had more time to give to my job and I pretty much work all the time, but I love it. So it's okay. But, I would say the board work is a quarterly board meeting that's usually a half day and oftentimes a dinner the night before. And so there's that time plus reading the prep materials, which is usually a couple hours. And then if you're on a committee, which usually you are, there's a committee meeting also once a quarter. So that's a second meeting that's usually an hour, very practically speaking. And then there's kind of the two other things. One is informal conversations with the CEO, usually, sometimes with other members of management if you're helping them with something. And that happens more sort of, I would say once a month or once every few months, depending on the CEO and what's going on with them. And then sometimes there are big things going on where, for example, I worked on hiring a new CEO at one of the companies. And so that was a bigger project. And I actually did that at a time, fortunately, before I had started Daydream. So I had the time to give to it. I definitely have decided 2 boards is the max I can do while spending so much time operating. So
Why is that?
just because I feel like I want to make sure most of my attention goes to Daydream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do I get on my first board?
There are many ways. One is, being accomplished and then knowing someone on the board because that the other members of the board or connecting with someone on the board, you don't have to necessarily have known them, but usually ideas for board members come often from other board members or from recruiters. Those are usually the 2 ways. What I would say is I started young, when I was younger in my career, as on the advisory board of a B2B company that serviced retailers. So when I was a retailer, I was at Urban Outfitters, and we were working with a third party, SaaS company, and they said, "Would you be a customer advisor?" Because I was their customer, and that was a great experience. And I actually ended up doing that 2 or 3 times, which was really good experience, both to help the company build a product that we as the customer wanted. So it was great for us, and also gave me a little sense of what it was like. And then I think the next board I was on was a private board. So it was a PE-backed company, and they had reached out to me because of my experience. So they found me. And then after that, it was through referrals. So it's funny because I actually have been called by recruiters for a number of boards, and a few of them I pursued and actually didn't get the role. But the boards that I'm on now, well, one of them, a recruiter called me, but the CEO had known me. We had been in a couple of meetings together. Our companies had done some work together. The other one, I was referred by a board member, and the other most recent one, I was referred by another board member. So I think, you need to become expert at something so you fill an obvious role on a board. What boards are looking to do is get a set of experiences that are together helpful to them. And so if you're thinking about a Sweet Green as an example, which is a board I'm on, there's someone who comes from the restaurant industry who ran Chipotle for many years. There's someone who comes from the media industry. There's someone who comes from, you always want a couple of finance people, because one of the roles of the board is to run the audit committee and to help with any kind of transaction. And then I tend to fill more of the marketing and digital consumer experience role. And so, I think you have to think about the role you would play on the board, what you would fill. And then, as with anything, reach out to people, network, tell people you love their company, and here's why you would be, great on the board. But I think it helps to start with private companies, smaller companies first, and then you build your way to public companies.
What's the craziest thing you've seen in a board meeting?
A board I was on, no longer on, long ago. One of the worst things that happened was the chief accounting officer had gotten a message from who she thought was the CEO telling her to transfer $3 million to an account for a transaction that she confidentially wanted to do. And she was, it was a fishing expedition, and it ended up turning into just a huge trauma, and investigation. It was shocking.
Did the money get recovered, or?
Some of it did, and
some of it didn't.
Some of it didn't.
If you could implant one idea into everyone in the world, what would it be?
That we are all lucky to different extents, and that those of us who are doing well have so much to be thankful for, and we all need to care about bringing up people who are less fortunate than us.
What's the hardest thing you've ever accomplished?
Probably running the New York City Marathon a year after I started running at all. I had never run before, and then the next year I ran the marathon.
That's amazing.
I watched it, and it was so inspiring. And I'm like, I'm going to start running, and I'm going to run this next year.
What was the hardest thing about getting ready for your marathon?
Doing a 18-mile practice run in the deep winter, when it was absolutely freezing out and snow was all around you.
On the East Coast?
Yeah.
Best advice for doing hard things?
I would say stay focused on the goal. If you can picture and envision once you've done it, what it's going to feel like. And you have to be able to see it. And if you can see it, then you can do what it takes to work through it to get there.
What accomplishment are you most proud of?
Probably having 2 really wonderful children. They're kind and loving and funny.
How do you measure your life?
Probably a combination of months I've stayed married, friends I've stayed close to, and jobs where I feel proud of my accomplishments, and colleagues that I've been able to help or have an impact on. Those are probably the things that combined mean the most.
If when you die you meet God, what do you hope he says to you?
I would want to be recognized, I guess, for my honesty and my tenacity. And I would hope that, he would show me where my friends and family are so I could reunite with them.
And finally, what's the biggest mark you want to leave on the world?
Honestly, making shopping smarter, better, easier, especially in fashion, helping the ecosystem to thrive, helping people find brands and products they love, helping brands and retailers, keep going. I am so dedicated to this cause, and it is the thing that I hope, I feel like shopping is better because of the things I was able to do at Nordstrom and at Sephora, and I would like Daydream to be the ultimate of all of that.
Well, if you've been pursuing it since you were 10, you've got to see it through.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for having us in your beautiful home.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's really fun to talk. Thanks for taking the time.
Divot.
On next week's episode.
I also just believe that God is the best of planners. And I think that gives me a lot of comfort when I am facing challenges in life, difficult decisions, difficult events like death in the family. And you can only fall back on there's a greater plan that only God knows. And God is the best of planners.